Just as you're required to register your car, so are you required to register your boat. Some states will specify registering motorboats only, others will include sailboats, all will include PWCs or personal watercraft. In most, but not all cases, you won't have to register boats like canoes or kayaks unless you attach an engine to them. Most states set a 3-year expiration on the registration, some will drop it to 2, others will make them expire on odd or even years. Like all other situations, make sure you know the laws for your state. Once you get the registration, it will have registration numbers on it that are assigned to your boat. The boat is then lettered with this information on either side of the bow. There are requirements for these letters too. They must be block letters at least 3 inches high and of contrasting color to the top sides that they're stuck to. They will consist of 2 letters which will identify the state, and these letters don't necessarily match the 2-letter U.S. postal codes. Those are followed by a space that's the width of 1 letter other than L or I, then an additional set of numbers, a space again, and a remaining letter. A state validation sticker will be supplied to you as well and gets adhered to one side to clearly indicate the month and year of expiration. Some states will issue 2 validation stickers, one for each side, and others even go so far as to specify that the letters must begin so many inches back from the bow. Most will just say in the bow area. Virtually every state will require you to not only display these letters on your boat, along with the validation sticker or stickers, but also carry the certificate of registration with you at all times while boating. Now, one other thing. The state where you register your boat must be the one where it's spending its time. That's the state that will want to collect the fees and taxes on your boat, so abandon your plans now to register your boat in a state with no taxes and dock it in another. The authorities will notice your boat and then check to see if it's still around after 60 days. If it is, they'll be looking for the tax money and registration fees. Some states have increased this period to 90 days as they figure you're not really trying to beat them out of taxes and fees, and you're also spending your money in their state. Check the laws for the state you're in. You are, however, certainly free to register in one state and navigate around the entire country if you'd like. It's actually a wonderful way to spend a retirement. Or so I'm told. Now hear this. Drowning caused nearly 70% of all boating deaths, and close to 85% of those people were not wearing life jackets. You see, drowning rarely occurs when you're swimming from your boat. It usually happens when you're unexpectedly thrown from your boat by heavy seas or after an accident. If you're not wearing your life jacket before you fall overboard, you've only served to add another problem to your already bad day. It is without question the single most important safety device that you can have on your boat. In fact, it's so important that federal regulations require that you have one Coast Guard approved life jacket available for each and every person on your boat, that it be the right size for each person and be within easy reach. Now, while it's a requirement to have a life jacket on board, remarkably, it's not required to be worn by an adult. Children, however, are a different story. Since just before Christmas of '02, the Coast Guard has made it a federal requirement that unless children 13 years old and under are below decks or in an enclosed cabin, they must wear an approved life jacket, sometimes referred to as a PFD or personal flotation device, while on board any vessel that's underway. When you're in state waters, each state will have its own minimum age requirement, which may or may not be below age 13. When the state has their own requirements, the Coast Guard requirements will default to them. So to stay legal, follow the state requirements. The emphasis here, though, is on being legal. So with that said, let me remind you that we're talking about smart boating. And smart boating dictates that everyone wears some form of life jacket at all times. Why? Well, for starters, the safety factor is overwhelming. They just don't work if you don't wear them. That, and they're next to impossible to put on if you're already in the water. And from my point of view, I simply can't justify why I'm not wearing one to my daughter when she has to. Lead by example for your friends and family and wear your life jacket at all times when on the water. And by the way, don't forget your best friends when considering your life jackets. Of course, we understand that no one wants to wear these bulky orange things. They're uncomfortable to wear, and frankly, you'll look ridiculous on the water wearing them. That's why there are some very clever alternatives. One is this inflatable vest. Easy to put on, comfortable to wear. This is what my family and I wear whenever we're out on the water. How about this nice jacket here? Would you believe that this is a U.S. Coast Guard approved flotation device? Believe it. Now this is comfort, and it does an incredible job of keeping you warm in the cool season. I'm telling you, if you boaters in the northern latitude get one of these, you'll easily add 2 months to your boating season. Now, when you've got such sensible alternatives, it seems that you would be hard-pressed to explain to anyone why you thought it a good idea not to wear a life jacket at all. Maybe it's because you think other boaters will laugh at you or call you a wuss. Well, that may happen, and my attitude is, say what you want, but I will never give you the opportunity to say, Captain Steve doesn't wear one, so why should I? Now, if that mindset helps prevent your life jacket from being in the boat even once when you're thrown in the water, then my day is made. You're in charge on your boat. Lead by example. If you don't wear a life jacket, you're putting yourself at risk, which puts everyone on the boat at risk, and that sets a bad example. Now, hopefully we've made the point that you would be smart to wear your life jacket in order to remain prepared in case of emergency. But if you still choose not to wear one at all times, then please, at least wear one when local conditions are ripe for an emergency to develop. What sort of conditions would those be? Well, periods of high boat traffic, severe weather, dangerous sea conditions, operations at night, or when you're boating alone. Now, since they're required to be readily accessible, we can certainly see that wearing them would qualify as being readily accessible. But let's take a moment to discuss what the authorities view as not readily accessible. Some of the more common examples of not readily accessible are having your life jacket still wrapped in the original plastic, stowed in locked compartments, or having other equipment on top of them. And let me say it one more time, they're horribly difficult, if not next to impossible, to put on once you're in the water. And that's if you're still functioning normally after falling overboard.
Let's take a moment and examine some of the types of life jackets and their uses. Type 1 life jackets are designed for offshore use, where rescue may be a long way off and a long wait. They're basically a flotation jacket with a full back, colored orange, with reflectors on them. They're more buoyant, which makes them good for rough seas, and they're very durable. Some will also be fitted with a strobe and whistle, but that's more dependent on the equipment requirements of the vessel they're used on due to its cruising proximity from shore, rather than the requirements of the life jacket itself. Type 1s are rated for 22 pounds of buoyancy and will keep any unconscious person floating face up. They come in only two sizes, child and adult. Most boaters will have Type 2 on board for nearshore or protected waters. These are the orange ones that you most commonly see whenever there's a picture or diagram of a life preserver. They provide 15.5 pounds of flotation, which is adequate to turn most unconscious persons face up. They come in four sizes: infant, child small, child medium, and adult. They tend to be inexpensive and are a great option for children and non-swimmers. Type 3 is inarguably the most versatile life jacket. This is the life jacket of choice for the water skier, angler, hunter, canoeist, and just about every general boater out there. It's very comfortable, durable, and designed to allow freedom of movement. Because they're so comfortable, these will likely solve any problems associated with getting everyone to wear a life jacket at all times. Just like the Type 2, they have 15.5 pounds of buoyancy, but due to their design, most wearers will have to tilt their heads back to keep their faces out of the water, so they're not recommended for long stays in the water. The best part of these is that they come in a wide range of sizes, styles, and colors to accommodate just about everyone.
Type 4 is the throwable device. You can remember that Type 4 means throwable by remembering the sentence, "I throw it for you." We'll talk more about these a little later. They're so important that they get their own section.
Type 5 covers a multitude of other types of gear. One of these is your survival suit, which looks like you're in a Gumby suit. These are typically found on commercial offshore fishing boats, particularly in the northern latitudes, as they'll keep you warm while keeping you afloat. You'll also have sailboarding and rafting jackets, deck suits, and work jackets in this category. Now this is important. Some personal flotation devices, or PFDs, in the Type 5 category will be accepted as part of the required equipment only if they are being worn. In other words, such a Type 5 PFD stowed away and ready for use will be viewed as not being on board at all. It's easy to spot the ones that are in this category of needing to be worn because they'll be clearly marked on the label. Basically, if it takes more than a minute to put it on, then it must be worn to be approved. Let me say it one more time. These restrictions are clearly marked on the label, so be sure to read it.
I have a friend whose wife was away for the week. I stopped in to see him and found him doing the laundry. That wasn't so unusual by itself, but it was the fact that he was looking at every label on every piece of clothing to determine just how to wash each piece. The very next day, this guy wants me to go with him to the marine store to help pick out a life jacket for his daughter. He needed me there to determine which one would be the right size for her to wear. Now, why would this same guy who agonized over the label on a t-shirt not even bother to look at the label on a life-saving device? Probably because, like most people, he figured that the label was stuck there with basic warnings that the lawyers mandated, like, "Warning, contents are hot" on the side of a coffee cup. Well, they're a little more important than that and warrant a closer look. Let's take a look at some and see what kinds of things they have to say.
Here's the label attached to an orange Type 2 life jacket that you carry on your boat. Let's see if there's anything interesting here. It says it's approved for recreational boats, but not for commercial operations. No problem there. I don't charge people to come out on my boat. Whoops, what have we here? Not approved for personal watercraft or water skiing. Okay, I'm glad I saw that one. I suppose that you could get really badly hurt if you fell off skis while wearing one of these. But I'll have people water skiing off my boat all the time. So let's go buy a ski vest and see what that label has to say for itself. Now we're talking. I'm still not allowed to use this for my boat if I carry persons for hire. That's okay. I have no intention of doing that. I can use it for my recreational vessel and for water skiing. Great, but what's this here? Adult small. Well, that works for me, but not my best friend, the sumo wrestler. I'll have to get a larger one for him. And I would have thought that one size would have fit the whole range of adults like the orange ones did.
The importance of getting the right size life jacket is easy to see when you look at this example. Here we have a typical 11-year-old girl. Hello, typical 11-year-old girl. When the body is in the water, it will attempt to go down and the life preserver will go up. If the life jacket is sized right, it will bring the child up with it and you have a good match. When it's too big, the life preserver comes up, but the child will drop right out through the bottom. When you put your life preserver onto your child, do a lift test like this to see if it stays on or slips right off. If it comes right off, it's too big, and it's a good thing you found out now.
Now, I wear the inflatable life jackets all the time. What do you suppose I could learn from a label on one of those? Well, let's take a look. Well, right off the bat, we see it's only approved when worn. We talked about that. If it's stowed, it's the same as not having it on board at all. But I lead by example and wear mine whenever the boat's underway, so no problem for me so far. Weight limits and size range are all good. Here we go. Approved for use only on recreational boats by persons at least 16 years old. Well, there's a biggie. My daughter's only 11. So I have to make sure that she's aware that these are for Mom and me only. Can do. What else? Check that it's properly armed. Yeah, I got all the arming and checking instructions from the owner's manual too. Ooh, here's a really good one. Don't wear underclothing. Yeah, I could see how that would be a problem. I could easily picture wearing this after sunset and just throwing a jacket on over it, so I'll have to remember not to do that.
So you see, the labels on life jackets are not just for keeping the lawsuits down. There's valuable information there for the smart boater, so read the labels. You just might be surprised at what you may find, like you may not be legal with what you have.
When the authorities stop you, the first thing every officer will check is the number of life jackets you have available. If they're not being worn, you'll go and fetch them, and while you do, the officer will count the people on board your boat. You'd better have at least one Coast Guard approved Type 1, 2, 3, or 5 life jacket for every person on board, and have the right size for every person on board, and have them readily accessible if they're not being worn. While it's not required, it's a pretty good idea to have extra of each on board, as you never really know how many adults and how many kids you'll have on your boat at any given time, or if you'll have extra friends joining you during the course of the day. Commercial operators are required to have 100% of their capacity in adult life jackets and an additional 10% for children, if that helps you in your planning.
Several things can cause a life jacket to go bad. With the exception of the Type 4 throwable cushion, sitting on the life jacket will cause them to lose their buoyancy. The manufacturers know that Type 4s will be used as cushions, so they're constructed a little bit differently than life jackets. It's also understandable that after several years of sitting in the dry, salt air or moist space under a seat, life jackets can start to get a little punky. Materials start to pull apart and straps give out. That's why you should check your life jackets regularly for signs of aging. Pull on the straps good and hard. If they pull apart or off, then it's a good thing that you found out now instead of later. If you get inspected by the authorities, that's exactly what they'll do. And if you have useless life jackets that are needed for your passengers, you'll be fined just as if you had none on board. Also, look for signs of discoloration. This can be a sign that the fabric is starting to deteriorate. If you have any doubts, grab a pinch of the fabric and give it a few tugs. If it pulls apart, get rid of it. Any other signs that tell you that the life jacket is no longer fresh and like new should get your attention and be cause for replacement. Inflatable life vests are my personal favorite. This is what I wear and make available for the adults on my boat. Automatic types come with a pull cord to activate the CO2 cartridge for inflation, and there's a water-activated backup as well in case you enter the water unconscious. All will have a manual inflation tube that you can blow into to inflate the jacket yourself. They're easy to put on, not overly restricting, and are very lightweight and comfortable. Inflatable life jackets, however, are prohibited for use on PWCs or personal watercraft and while skiing or whitewater rafting. You also need to be over 16 years of age to wear most of them, but not all. Some newer units are just coming available for kids under 16. Now, inflatable life jackets have some unique characteristics that set them apart from your average PFD or personal flotation device. And because we're recommending them so highly, we need to talk about the special maintenance that is required for these jackets.
Firstly, they require inspection before putting them on. Let's unfold one and get a close-up and personal look at the arming mechanism and see what all the fuss is about. Looking at the arming mechanism, you'll see where there should be 3 green indicators, and they're marked A, B, and C. If any are red, then you are not properly armed. A is a green pin that will go into this spot here to hold the manual inflation arm in place. This one is disarmed now, so we can fool with it a bit. See, if I pull the jerk cord, the manual inflation arm comes out, and you can see that it has a hole that lines up with this hole here. You insert the green pin through the 2 holes to hold the arm in place. Pull the arm with the pin in place, and it breaks the pin, which drops off, revealing this red, not ready indicator. B is the indicator for the water sensing pill. See, when I lift this handle, it reveals the pill right there. This deteriorates when it gets submerged and activates the CO2 cartridge. If it's gone, then this indicator will turn to its red not ready status. It takes about 10 seconds for this pill to deteriorate once it hits the water. C is the indicator that just shows that the CO2 cartridge is screwed in far enough. It does not indicate that the cartridge has a full charge. The determination of whether to replace the cartridge or not is left to you. If you discharge it, then replace it. It's only good for one shot. Over on this side here, we have the manual inflation tube, a whistle to attract attention, and reflective tape for finding us at night. To inflate manually, simply pop the cap and blow. To deflate, push down on the tube. So let's go ahead and charge this jacket and see it in action. First, lift this lever. The water sensing pill is already in place. So now all I have to do is close the jerk cord lever and insert the pin. And screw in a fresh CO2 cartridge. I first inspect the cartridge for damage by looking at the bottom to make sure that it's not punctured and there are no holes in the sides either. Looks good, so I'll go ahead and screw it in place. And by the way, you can remove it again to recheck it for damage whenever needed. Once it's screwed all the way in, I close the lever, check to see that I have 3 green indicators, and I'm good to go. Refold it up, making sure the jerk cord handle hangs down below the jacket, and let's put it on.
Once it's on, you again make sure that the handle is hanging down and ready to go. And you should practice grabbing it with either hand until it's familiar. One good pull, and I'm ready to float. As we read on the label, always make sure to put these jackets on over your clothes and never inflate them until you're ready to enter the water. Inflating them prematurely can unnecessarily restrict you if you're in an awkward place or a tight position. This is a Type 4 throwable device, and we include this in the required section, although it's only required if your boat is 16 feet in length or longer. If your boat is under that length, be smart and have one on board anyway. Some states require them on all boats, so check to see if you're in compliance. As I say, you should have one anyway. Their usefulness dictates that they be on every boat. And for goodness sakes, keep it handy at all times to throw overboard in a moment's notice. This tactic is an essential part of every man overboard procedure, and we'll discuss that in depth in the emergency procedures section. And just as with regular PFDs, you're required to have it readily available. In other words, not wrapped in plastic or locked away. Most operators choose to sit on them since they make great cushions. But be advised, however, 1 or 2 states view this as a violation. And if you live in one of those states, then simply say, "I'm sorry, officer, won't happen again," and put it under your seat. Now, throwable devices are not designed to be used as life jackets, so they won't help you meet PFD requirements for each person on board. What they can do, however, is give you a floating object to hang on to while the boat comes back around to pick you up, and help mark the spot where someone went overboard by tossing one into the water as soon as that happens. They come in seat cushion, ring, and horseshoe models. You'll come to appreciate the utility of these simple devices when we reach the section on man overboards. Remember, Type 4 is throwable by saying, "I throw for you."
There are navigation light requirements for your boat, but only for when you're operating it between the hours from sunset to sunrise or in periods of restricted visibility. So what if you never intend to use your boat at night or in restricted visibility? Well, then you don't need navigation lights, right? Sort of. The problem is that foul weather or periods of restricted visibility can sneak up on you when you least expect it. All it takes is a temperature change to produce fog where it was clear just a short time ago. And what if you break down and it takes you into the night to get back underway?
If you have a personal watercraft or PWC, then you typically won't have navigation lights, and that's okay because you're not likely to go very far from where you started from and can get back home or to your car before there's a visibility problem. But the smart boater will make sure that there are adequate navigation lights on any boat that will operate away from the dock or the beach. We'll get more into the specifics of how navigation lights are used when we get to the rules of the road section.
Fire extinguishers are classified by both a letter and a number. The letter indicates the type of fire that it extinguishes. Type A is for trash, wood, and paper. Type B, the kind you're required to have on your boat, will put out liquid fires like gas, oil, and grease. Type C will put out electrical fires, and Type D will put out flammable metals such as magnesium. So if the letter indicates the type of fire it puts out, the number indicates the size of the extinguisher. The higher the number, the bigger the extinguisher. A dry chemical extinguisher, which basically smothers the fire with a chemical powder, is approved for all types and will probably be the type that you will have on your boat. Coast Guard approval of a fire extinguisher guarantees 3 things. First, that they're portable. That means either Type 1 or Type 2. Type 3 extinguishers are just too big to be used on boats. Second, that they're Type B, which again is for liquid fires like gas, oil, and grease. And third, that they have a marine-type mounting bracket. That will mean that it has a wraparound strap that holds it stationary under adverse conditions, not just the hanger type of mount. There are several Type B fire extinguishers, but the 2 most common are carbon dioxide and dry chemical. Dry chemical extinguisher will also need to have a pressure gauge attached to it to be Coast Guard approved. The number of extinguishers that you're required to have on your boat is based on the length of your boat. Less than 26 feet, only 1 B1 is required. From 26 feet to 40 feet, you need 2 B1s or 1 B2. From 40 feet to 65 feet, you need 3 B1s or 1 B1 and 1 B2. Now you don't need to memorize this list, I never could. Just look up your boat and make sure that you have the quantity of Type B extinguishers that you need. And of course, there are some exceptions on boats under 26 feet where the fire extinguisher is not required. An open John boat with a small outboard comes to mind. But really now, just explain to your kids why they don't need a fire extinguisher on board. They'll understand. Come on, put one on anyway. If you discharge a fire extinguisher, even briefly, it will need to be either recharged and re-safetied, or you can just run to the store and pick up a new one since they're not very expensive. You can tell if a dry chemical extinguisher has lost its charge by looking at the gauge. If it's in the green zone, you're good to go. A dry chemical extinguisher that does not have a gauge will not meet Coast Guard approval. To determine if a carbon dioxide extinguisher is full, you have to weigh it. As far as how to use a fire extinguisher goes, stay tuned. We'll get heavy into that in the emergency procedures section.
A backfire flame arrestor is a required device on all gas-powered inboard engines with a carburetor. It's designed to suppress any flames that may erupt from the carburetor, which may ignite any gasoline fumes in the engine compartment. Adding these devices to the engine reduces the risk of explosion, so quite appropriately, they're required. It's simply a wire mesh air filter mounted on the carburetor, which prevents flames from escaping after a backfire. Your outboard motor is sufficiently ventilated to the fresh air to remove any dangerous fumes, so there's no risk of explosion, so there's no requirement to have these on an outboard.
If you're on a boat that requires a flame arrestor, then it will need to be stamped on the top with an approval from either the United States Coast Guard, Underwriters Laboratory, or Society of American Engineers.
All engines need air to operate. Now, when you have an inboard or inboard-outboard engine where the motor is entirely enclosed, you will need to have some kind of natural ventilation in the compartments where the engine is located. This typically takes the form of outlets and exhaust ducts exposed to the atmosphere rather than another compartment. And exhaust ducts will originate in the lower one-third of the engine compartment as gas fumes are heavier than air and will sink down to this level. This natural ventilation system only works when the boat is moving and the air is flowing over the boat. What about when you're sitting at the dock and there's an accumulation of fumes in the bilge? How do you get rid of those fumes before you start the engine? Well, gas-powered boats built after 1978 will have powered ventilation systems, or blowers, that should be run for at least 4 minutes prior to starting your engine. This removes the explosive vapors accumulating in the bilge and leaves you with a safe start to your day. You should also run these blowers after fueling your boat too, again, to remove explosive vapors. Boats built after 1980 will also have a placard that warns of running the blowers for 4 minutes before starting the engine. This is the part of the requirements that has always fascinated me, mainly because the rule doesn't make sense to me. It starts like this. If your boat is 12 meters or 39.5 feet or more in length, then you're required to have a horn and a bell on your boat. So far so good. If you're big, you need to be able to make noise. But if your boat is less than 12 meters, as most of ours are, the requirements are a lot easier on you, but not necessarily safer. For these boats, you don't need the bell, and you don't even have to have a horn. Just some means of producing a sound signal is all that's required. Even a sports whistle will do. But, I mean really, why just get by when you can easily just get a good strong air horn? Have you ever tried to get someone's attention by yelling over the sound of their engines? It rarely works. When you have to give passing and meeting signals that we'll discuss under the rules of the road section, you'll get a lot farther by using a horn instead of a loud whistle. And in restricted visibility, a good loud horn will prevent a collision long before any whistle will. So, here's a typical example of whether you want to be legal or legal and safe. Personally, I'm not the kind of a person who won't get something for my own safety just because the law doesn't make me do it. I just don't feel the need to force the government to protect me when I can take care of myself. I'm a smart boater, and so are you. Get yourself a horn. Since there are no requirements for the type of sound-producing device that you'll have, it stands to reason that they are also one of the few things that you will have on your boat that does not need to be Coast Guard approved.
There are two types of visual distress signals, pyrotechnic and non-pyrotechnic. The non-pyrotechnic category of signals includes a distress flag. Do you know what one looks like? Well, they're 3 feet by 3 feet, orange in color, and have a black square and a black ball. Then there's the electric distress light. Have you ever seen one of those? Well, it should be flashing at an interval of 50 to 70 times per minute or automatically flash the Morse code signal for SOS. They're only good at night, though. And then there are the code flags for the letters N and C. Now, I put it to you. If you saw any one of these signals, would you know that it meant distress? Would the other guy? Maybe, maybe not. Now, how would you react if you saw orange smoke billowing from a boat? How about if you saw a red flare at night? Of course you'd come running to the rescue with the Coast Guard right behind you, wouldn't you? That's a sure indication that something is wrong, even to the uninitiated. So with that said, our recommendation is for 6 handheld red flares for night use and 6 handheld orange smoke flares for day use. A minimum of 3 of each are required, but again, be a smart boater and don't sell yourself short. Your flares will need to be Coast Guard approved, in serviceable condition, and, like all other safety equipment, readily accessible. They will also have an expiration date stamped on the sides. Look carefully at this date. If your flares have passed their expiration date, they're viewed as not being on board at all, and you'll be in violation of the requirement to have them. They should be stored in a dry location. Ideally, this dry location will be the inside of a watertight container that's colored red or orange and marked flares. The only vessels not required to carry day signals are vessels under 16 feet in length, boats participating in an organized event such as a regatta or a parade, open sailboats less than 26 feet, and manually propelled boats like a rowboat, canoe, or kayak. These vessels are required to carry nighttime signals, however. Additionally, no signals are required on coastal waters and adjoining rivers when the waters narrow to less than 2 miles. At all other times, they need to be on board.